They were the original masterminds of espionage, the faces behind one of television's most iconic spy teams. Mission Impossible 1966 to 1973 thrilled millions with its suspenseful plots, daring disguises, and the unforgettable theme song. But while the show's characters always beat the odds, real life wasn't always so kind to the actors who brought them to life. Behind the scenes, many faced personal struggles, heartbreaking losses, and ultimately tragic endings. In this look back, we remember the stars of the classic series who have sadly passed away, some taken far too soon, others fading quietly from the spotlight. Their missions may be over, but their legacies endure. Peter Graves was born Peter Dussler Ornis on March 18, 1926, and took on the mantle of Jim Phelps in 1967, stepping into the role at 41. As the cerebral and commanding leader of the IMF, Phelps was a mastermind of deception and moral resolve, revered by audiences as the unshakable compass of the team. However, the clean exterior of Graves concealed more than a few personal contradictions. Though hailed as a wartime hero and devoted family man, Graves harbored a lifelong struggle with control and secrecy. His Midwestern upbringing was severe, raised in a rigid, emotionally cold household, with a domineering father who rejected Graves' passion for acting as foolish vanity. After returning from World War II, Graves dabbled in underground theater before catching his big break, but even success brought paranoia. He was known on sets for his obsessive need for retakes and would berate younger actors for minor mistakes. Behind the scenes, Graves was embroiled in a decades-long rivalry with his brother James Arness of Gunsmoke fame, a relationship fraught with jealousy and professional envy. In the 1970s, Graves was accused by a young actress of predatory conduct, a claim quickly buried by studio lawyers, though it haunted him privately. He also had a gambling problem during the early 80s, which nearly cost him his home in Malibu. His marriage, though enduring, was tested by emotional distance and rumored affairs, including with a European co-star from an obscure Italian thriller. Graves refused to reprise his role in the 1996 Mission Impossible film, disgusted by the betrayal of his character's integrity, a move that alienated some studio executives but solidified his moral stance with longtime fans. He died suddenly on March 14, 2010, in Los Angeles, just 4 days shy of his 84th birthday from a heart attack. Graves left behind a sprawling estate worth approximately $10 million, including multiple properties, classic cars, and investment portfolios. He was remembered not only for his contributions to television, but also for the layers of mystery and contradiction he carried to the grave. Greg Moras was born on September 27, 1933, and took on the role of Barney Collier in Mission Impossible in 1966 at the age of 33. His character, a tech wizard with nerves of steel, became a cornerstone of the IMF team, beloved for his quiet strength, analytical mind, and cool-headed responses even in the tensest moments. Fans admired Barney's unshakable calm and his ability to crack complex systems without ever firing a bullet. But behind Morris's composed on-screen presence lay a man shaped by deep scars from his early life. Raised in poverty in Cleveland, Moras was the son of a struggling blue-collar worker and endured a childhood clouded by neglect and constant relocation. He was reportedly mocked for his stutter and skin tone and learned early to suppress emotion as a survival mechanism. Despite rising to fame, Morris's journey was anything but smooth. After Mission Impossible, he faced a career downturn, often typecast and gradually edged out of top-tier roles. A bitter feud with a prominent director over alleged racial bias nearly derailed his career in the 1980s, leading to several years of financial strain and substance dependency. He quietly battled alcoholism during this period and checked into rehab twice, facts he later admitted in a rare 1993 interview. His personal life was equally stormy. Though married for decades, the union was marred by long absences and rumors of infidelity. His son Phil Morris later spoke about their rocky relationship, describing his father as distant and unpredictable. As the 1990s approached, Morris's health began to decline. The deaths of several close friends and the pressure of fading fame weighed heavily. He died on August 27, 1996, in Las Vegas at 62, from complications related to lung and brain cancer, likely linked to years of heavy smoking and stress. His net worth at the time was estimated between $1 to $2 million, largely from residuals and minor roles, but he left behind no major estate, and most of his belongings were quietly sold or donated. His outspoken criticism of the Mission Impossible reboot was one of his final public acts, walking out of the theater in disgust, declaring, "They murdered everything we stood for." Martin Landau was born on June 20, 1928, and took on the role of Roland Hand in Mission Impossible in 1966 at the age of 38. Roland was a master of disguise, charming, sly, and almost disturbingly convincing in his impersonations. His presence added elegance to the IMF team, and Landau's meticulous method acting turned the role into something iconic. Landau's childhood in Depression-era Brooklyn was bleak. He was the son of Jewish immigrants who barely scraped by, and his father's temper created a climate of fear at home. As a lanky, artistic teen, Martin was mocked by his peers and teachers, often accused of being too sensitive, leading him to suppress his emotions, something that would later bleed into his performances. Though he rose quickly in Hollywood after studying at the Actors Studio alongside James Dean, Landau's career hit devastating lows. He was originally cast as the villain in North by Northwest, only to be demoted mid-shoot. His greatest career collapse came when he was blackballed after refusing to renew his Mission Impossible contract in a bitter dispute with the producers over creative control and pay. He wanted more money, CBS wanted loyalty. Neither won. This decision derailed his momentum for nearly 2 decades. Landau became known in the industry as difficult, uncooperative, and demanding. There were rumors, never confirmed, of backstage intimidation tactics, shouting matches with directors, and romantic entanglements with much younger actresses. His marriage to Mission Impossible co-star Barbara Bain crumbled after years of tension and jealousy, with accusations of emotional neglect and infidelity surfacing in divorce filings. Their daughter, Juliet, would later allude to long periods of estrangement. Personally, Landau never fully recovered from the death of James Dean, whom he idolized and competed with. He battled deep bouts of depression and refused therapy, instead isolating himself in his Hollywood Hills home. Martin Landau died on July 15, 2017, in Los Angeles, due to hypovolemic shock caused by internal bleeding and heart disease, at the age of 89. His estate, largely built on real estate investments and film residuals, was estimated at $10 million. Stephen Hill, born Solomon Krakowski on February 24, 1922, in Seattle, Washington, took on the role of Daniel Briggs in Mission Impossible in 1966 when he was 44 years old. Briggs was a composed, calculating leader, enigmatic, and cool-headed, embodying the perfect spy mastermind. His character captivated audiences with his cerebral authority, but what viewers didn't see was how much of that cold control mirrored Hill's off-screen, emotional distance. Daniel Briggs only lasted 1 season, and the reason was shrouded in far more than religious beliefs. While it's widely reported that Hill left due to his refusal to work on the Sabbath, insiders have revealed a much darker reality. He frequently vanished during filming, showed up late or unprepared, and clashed fiercely with producers. He reportedly had a breakdown mid-shoot that forced a script, rewrite, and shutdown of the set. He was not just a devout man, but a deeply tormented one. Hill's childhood was bleak. Raised in poverty during the Depression, he faced constant anti-Semitic bullying, which led to his obsession with self-discipline and emotional suppression. As a young man, he was often seen as distant and volatile, with peers labeling him too intense and socially rigid. His personal life was equally chaotic. His first marriage ended in a bitter divorce, with allegations that he was domineering and emotionally unavailable. His children later spoke anonymously about growing up in a house of silence and shame. After disappearing from acting for nearly a decade, during which he lived in near-reclusive religious communities in New York, Hill reinvented himself with Law and Order, where his character's stern, reserved demeanor mirrored his real-life persona. Despite the comeback, he never fully reconciled with his past or his estranged children. Hill died on August 23, 2016, in Monteith, New York, at 94 years old from natural causes, isolated and reportedly without any of his family at his bedside. His estate, surprisingly well-maintained, was valued at around $8 million, including vintage film royalties and investments in religious institutions. Jack Donner, born on October 29, 1928, played the role of Buckaroo in Mission Impossible in 1966 at the age of 38. Though his screen time was brief, Donner's piercing eyes and cryptic demeanor made Buckaroo unforgettable, a shadowy figure who embodied the show's tension between illusion and reality. Raised in a strict and emotionally repressive home, Donner's childhood in Los Angeles was marred by neglect and emotional abandonment. His father was a silent war veteran prone to explosive outbursts, and Jack often disappeared into books and make-believe to survive a house devoid of affection. He never spoke of it publicly, but those close to him say he wore his childhood like an invisible shroud. Donner's acting career was a slow, brutal climb. He faced countless rejections, was once fired from a promising soap opera for refusing to sleep with an executive, and spent years trapped in minor roles that went unnoticed. He battled depression and disappeared from Hollywood in the late 70s after suffering a breakdown during a theater production. Rumors swirled. Some whispered about a nervous collapse. Others said he punched a producer backstage. The truth lay somewhere in between. He was exhausted, broke, and convinced he had failed. Though he recovered and rebuilt his career in the 80s, Donner was never embraced by the mainstream. He was often labeled difficult, mostly for his uncompromising insistence on script integrity and for berating younger co-stars he felt were lazy. In his personal life, Donner wrestled with a need for connection that often led to chaotic relationships. He was married 3 times, all ending in divorce, and his only son refused to speak to him for over a decade, claiming Jack was obsessed with control and power. Donner once dated a much younger actress who later sued him for emotional abuse. Though the case was quietly settled, the scandal haunted him. Jack Donner died on September 21, 2019, at the age of 90 in Sherman Oaks, California, from undisclosed natural causes. At the time of his death, he left behind a modest fortune, estimated between $1 and $2 million, primarily from real estate and his theater. Leonard Nemoy was born on March 26, 1931, and joined Mission Impossible in 1969, portraying the enigmatic IMF agent Paris at age 38. Paris was mysterious, composed, and skilled in deception, a clear echo of Nimoy's Spock, whose fame he desperately tried to escape. Raised in a tight-knit yet impoverished Ukrainian Jewish household in Boston, he was a quiet, brooding child who turned to theater to escape his parents' bitter arguments and the anti-Semitic slurs of working-class Boston. Though Star Trek made him a cultural icon, it also ruined his marriage. During the peak of his fame, he began drinking heavily, sometimes arriving to set reeking of alcohol. Nimoy later admitted in interviews that the pressure of fame and fan obsession with Spock fractured his identity. His marriage to Sandra Zober unraveled amid accusations of emotional abuse, infidelity, and long absences. Their divorce after 33 years was not only bitter, it left their children, especially Adam, deeply resentful. Adam Nimoy would later admit they were estranged for years due to Leonard's drinking and narcissistic behavior. Nimoy's image was clean, but there were whispers of emotional volatility, fits of rage at underpaid crew members, and even a brief fling with a Mission Impossible co-star that nearly became tabloid fodder. He eventually sought help for his alcoholism, but the damage was done. Though he found some peace through poetry, photography, and directing, he remained haunted by Spock's shadow, so much so that he titled his autobiographies, "I'm Not Spock," and later, "I Am Spock," a symbolic surrender to the persona he once despised. Nimoy suffered from COPD in his final years, the result of decades of smoking he had long quit. He spent his last months confined to his home in Bel Air, physically frail and emotionally withdrawn. He died on February 27, 2015, from complications related to the disease at the age of 83. At the time of his death, Nimoy's estate was valued at an estimated $45 million, built on Star Trek royalties, directing hits like 3 Men and a Baby and savvy licensing deals. Sid Hey, born Sidney Eddie Moses Ian on July 14, 1939, took on the role of Musha in Mission Impossible in 1966 at age 27. Musha was not a man of many words, but his physicality and brooding silence gave him a terrifying presence. Born to Armenian immigrants in Fresno, California, Haig endured a childhood laced with bullying and cultural alienation. He was mocked for his looks and ethnicity, and he retreated into drums and monster movies to find peace. His parents, devout and conservative, never approved of his career choice, leading to years of estrangement. Haig's career was a roller coaster of misfires and cult acclaim. While he appeared in over 350 television shows and films, he was typecast so viciously that he quit acting in the early 90s. "I was tired of playing the same greasy thugs and silent killers," he once said. But it wasn't just the roles. Haig's volatile temper often got him blacklisted. He once stormed off a set and shattered a director's windshield with a crowbar after being called a racial slur. Another time, he was nearly arrested for assaulting a makeup artist who botched his prosthetics. His biggest career misstep, however, was turning down the role of Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction, which later went to Ving Rhames and redefined 90s cinema. Married only once to Susan L. Oberg, he lived a nomadic existence marked by depression, substance abuse, and what he later called years of spiritual bankruptcy. Though beloved by horror fans, Haig's real-world relationships were strained. He lost multiple friends to overdose and suicide, and at one point checked himself into rehab not for drugs, but for what he called emotional addiction to chaos. In his final years, he was plagued by COPD and suffered a devastating fall that led to hospitalization. Sid Hey died on September 21, 2019, in Thousand Oaks, California, at the age of 80. Cause of death: cardiorespiratory arrest with complications from aspergillus pneumonia and respiratory failure. Despite it all, Haig left behind a net worth of around $1.5 to $2 million, much of it from horror convention appearances and his cult resurgence in Rob Zombie films. Joseph Ruskin, born April 14, 1924, portrayed Colonel Scutari in Mission: Impossible in 1966, making his first appearance in the series at age 42. His character was polished yet menacing, embodying a quiet ruthlessness that matched the show's espionage tone. Ruskin's recurring roles as shadowy power brokers turned him into a cult favorite, especially among fans who relished the show's darker conspiratorial edge. Born into a working-class Jewish family during the Great Depression, Ruskin's early life in Massachusetts was a daily battle against poverty and anti-Semitism. He rarely spoke of his past, but former classmates recall that he was often taunted for his name and background, which he later changed to escape prejudice. These formative traumas contributed to his meticulous control in adulthood, an obsession with perfection that some called borderline tyrannical. Though respected, Ruskin was not immune to controversy. In the late 70s, he allegedly clashed with a young director on a sci-fi film set, storming off mid-production and refusing to return unless creative authority was restructured. Though the incident was buried quietly, insiders whispered of Ruskin's growing difficulty behind the scenes. He was known for being fiercely protective of union rights, but also for sabotaging roles he felt were beneath him. Ruskin never married, a choice he linked to his lifelong distrust of intimacy. He had a decades-long affair with a married costume designer, which ended bitterly when she wrote a thinly veiled memoir revealing their relationship and painting him as brilliant but emotionally vacant. Estranged from family and battling skin cancer in his final years, Ruskin turned inward, spending his time rereading Kafka and meticulously cataloging his film archive. He died on December 28, 2013, in Santa Monica at the age of 89 from natural causes. At the time of his death, his estate was modest, estimated between $1 to $2 million. John Vernon, born on February 24, 1932, played the role of General Ramon Sabatini in Mission: Impossible in 1969 at the age of 37. His character, a cold, power-hungry dictator, was a chilling reflection of real-world tyrants, and viewers were both riveted and repulsed by his steely performance. But behind Vernon's commanding screen presence was a childhood scarred by instability. Raised in a poor immigrant family of Armenian and German-Polish descent, he grew up in post-Depression Saskatchewan amid financial ruin and social isolation. Vernon often felt like an outsider due to his ethnic roots and struggled with feelings of inadequacy and rage, emotions he reportedly funneled into his acting. His time at RADA in London only deepened his complex, brooding persona. Though he enjoyed a long career, Vernon was haunted by near misses in industry politics. He was once up for a lead role in The Godfather, but lost it reportedly due to clashing with studio executives, an incident that spiraled into years of being typecast as villains. He developed a reputation for being emotionally distant and occasionally manipulative on set. A notable scandal emerged in the 1980s when a co-star anonymously accused him of verbal abuse and toxic behavior during a TV shoot, though no legal action followed. Vernon's personal life was no less stormy. His marriage to Nancy West lasted over 2 decades, but was marred by long periods of separation and rumored affairs. His relationship with his children was described by a family friend as strained and cold, particularly with his daughter, Kate, an actress who later found her own success. His later years were marked by deep regret over these rifts, especially as he battled heart issues. John Vernon died on February 1, 2005, in Los Angeles due to complications following heart surgery at the age of 72. He left behind a net worth estimated between $5 to $10 million, largely from decades of steady work in film and voice acting. His estate included royalties from animated series, real estate investments in British Columbia, and vintage car collections. Arthur Badinides was born on April 9, 1923, and stepped into the role of Father Paulo Dominguez in Mission: Impossible in 1967 at age 43. His character, a composed and principled figure grounded in faith and reason, added moral weight to an often morally ambiguous world of espionage. The calm gravitas he brought to the screen left an impression, despite the character's brief appearance. But behind the priest's robes was a man whose life had been marked by turbulence, rejection, and secrets rarely acknowledged. Badinides was born into a deeply dysfunctional Greek-American family in Tacoma, where emotional abuse and poverty were daily realities. His father, a failed entrepreneur, once burned young Arthur's only set of schoolbooks in a drunken rage. Scarred by these early traumas, he fled home at 16 and lied about his age to join the Navy during World War II. After the war, he struggled to find his place in Hollywood, frequently passed over due to his ethnic appearance in a whitewashed industry. His career lurched between typecast roles, smug mobsters, sleazy barkeeps, and foreign generals. His biggest failure came in 1961 when he was abruptly fired from a major studio production over allegations that he physically threatened a director on set. It torpedoed his rising career, forcing him into B-movies and character parts. Off set, he had a fierce temper and an addiction to horse racing that drained his finances repeatedly. His first marriage ended in scandal after his wife accused him of emotional cruelty and public humiliation, claims that were quietly settled out of court. His second marriage was more stable, but his children later described him as an absent shadow with a hard edge. In the late 80s, Badinides suffered a nervous breakdown and withdrew from acting for nearly 5 years, living in semi-isolation in a San Fernando Valley duplex. He died of natural causes on January 10, 2000, in Los Angeles, at the age of 76. At the time of his death, he owned a modest home, a collection of rare war memorabilia, and had a net worth estimated between $1 to $2 million, mostly earned through decades of unglamorous but consistent work in the background of Hollywood. Vic Pin, born Victor Herbert Perrin on April 26, 1916, in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, played the character Cheever in Mission: Impossible in 1967 when he was 51 years old. Though his role was minor, Perrin's chilling delivery gave his brief appearance an unsettling power. However, his true fame came as the disembodied control voice of The Outer Limits, which cemented his legacy as the eerie narrator of many childhood nightmares. Yet behind the mic, Perrin lived a life full of frustration, rejection, and bitterness. His youth was scarred by loneliness. Born to emotionally distant parents, he spent hours holed up in his room, mimicking radio broadcasts to escape neglect. As a young actor in the 1940s and 50s, he struggled to break into the Hollywood scene. He was repeatedly passed over for leading roles because of his unconventional looks and piercing voice, which studios labeled as too sinister. This rejection bred a deep resentment. He became known for his cynicism and disdain for Hollywood's vanity. Though never the center of public scandal, Perrin's private life was marked by emotional damage. He married actress Rita Perrin, but their union was cold and perfunctory. Several colleagues recalled him mocking Rita behind her back, referring to her as "my co-star in Misery." They divorced quietly, but sources claim their split was preceded by years of mutual emotional neglect and screaming matches behind closed doors. His only son became estranged, allegedly due to Perrin's dismissive attitude and obsession with work. He also had a well-known alcohol problem that worsened in the late 70s. He once appeared intoxicated during a live voiceover session, resulting in a permanent ban from a major animation studio. In the final decade of his life, Perrin lived alone, scribbling cryptic poetry and unpublished science fiction stories while slowly succumbing to cancer. He died on July 4, 1989, in Los Angeles at the age of 73. His estate was modest, valued between $1 and $2 million, primarily built on residuals from radio, Disney narration projects, and voice acting. Albert Pollson was born on December 13, 1925, and debuted as the chilling Albert Zembra in Mission: Impossible in 1966 at age 41. With a steely glare and clipped diction, Pollson carved out one of the show's most memorable villains. Zembra was not just a man of intellect and malice, but but a study in psychological warfare. Pollson's strength lay in portraying characters who terrified with their calm. It was art mirroring his own dark complexities. Born in Ecuador to a family that fled Nazi-occupied Europe, Pollson carried the trauma of exile and loss throughout his life. He was reportedly haunted by the death of two siblings in wartime Europe, which fueled his intensity on stage and screen. His childhood was filled with dislocation, violence, and a sense of alienation that never left him. Though classically trained and an Emmy winner, Pollson's career was hampered by his reputation for being difficult. Directors praised his depth but dreaded his moods. He often demanded rewrites, and once halted a production mid-scene to challenge a co-star's line delivery, storming off set for 3 days. In 1974, he was briefly blacklisted after being named in a lawsuit alleging sexual misconduct during a theater production in Boston. The case was quietly dismissed, but the whispers followed him. He never married, and his romantic life was elusive and steeped in rumor. Some colleagues hinted he lived a closeted existence, while others spoke of intense affairs with married actresses. He lived alone in a cluttered Hollywood Hills home, surrounded by Nabokov first editions and Soviet-era relics. Pollson reportedly suffered from chronic depression and was prescribed medication well into his later years. He died on April 25, 2004, in Los Angeles from natural causes at age 78. His estate, worth approximately $2 to $3 million, included stocks, antiques, and royalties from film and theater rights. Joe Moras was born on February 7, 1923, and first appeared on Mission: Impossible in 1967 at age 44, playing Clegg, a calculating, cold-blooded figure whose strategic mind and stoic demeanor perfectly mirrored the darker roles that defined Moras's career. His portrayal left a subtle but chilling impression. In real life, Moras was just as enigmatic. A decorated World War II Marine, he returned for the Pacific Front deeply changed. Friends later claimed he suffered from undiagnosed PTSD, which led to bouts of reclusion and silent rage that he suppressed beneath his disciplined public image. A Yale graduate and founding member of Projects 58, Moras cultivated an air of intellectual sophistication, but this was often a facade to mask deep-seated insecurity about his fading relevance. Though respected in the industry, Moras was quietly tormented by being typecast, always the bureaucrat, the villain, the tight-lipped sergeant, never the leading man. His most crushing failure came in the early 1970s, when he was dropped from a high-profile film at the last minute due to creative differences that some believed stemmed from an on-set altercation with a young director. Moras was known to be uncompromising and sharp-tongued. He once stormed off a set after a younger co-star mocked his TV actor status. Behind closed doors, he never married and lived most of his adult life alone. Former colleagues recalled his apartment filled with military memorabilia and stacks of unread scripts, roles he was either passed over for or never had the courage to audition for. Despite decades of steady television work, he remained a mystery even to close friends. He refused interviews, dodged personal questions, and rarely attended Hollywood events. In later years, he became increasingly reclusive, reportedly refusing visitors and battling heart problems in silence. Joe Moras died from cardiac arrest on November 7, 2009, in Glendale, California, at the age of 86. His net worth, estimated at $1 to $2 million, came from conservative savings and residuals from his appearances on iconic series like The Twilight Zone, Hawaii Five-0, and Mission Impossible. Barry Atwater, born May 16, 1918, in Denver, Colorado, took on the role of Dr. Carlos Enero in Mission Impossible in 1966, at the age of 48. The character, an icy, manipulative operative with a dangerous intellect, was perfectly matched to Atwater's dark, penetrating screen presence. Though he exuded control on screen, his early life was unstable. Raised by strict disciplinarian parents, he developed what some colleagues described as a simmering inner rage, masked by a calm exterior. In private, he was fiercely reclusive, often locking himself away for days at a time to meditate obsessively under the influence of Zen Buddhism, which he practiced to manage his deep-seated anxiety and paranoia. He viewed Hollywood as spiritually corrosive and often clashed with directors over what he called soul-dead scripts. One producer from a low-budget horror project claimed Atwater vanished for 3 days, only to return with a rewritten monologue and demand the entire scene be res-hot, threatening to quit if denied. Though he largely avoided traditional scandals, Atwater made headlines in 1956 when his Los Angeles home was burglarized. While nothing was publicly disclosed as stolen, Whispers circulated that he'd lost a collection of rare spiritual manuscripts and private writings, which he never recovered. His marriage to costume designer Avis Atwater was troubled, marked by frequent separations, and never produced children. The couple quietly divorced in the early 70s, and Atwater lived alone for the remainder of his life. He became increasingly bitter toward the industry in his final years, writing unpublished essays accusing TV producers of emasculating masculinity for ratings and turning actors into decorative husks. Despite his growing alienation, he remained a prolific presence in cult television, portraying iconic roles like the terrifying vampire Janos Skorzeny in The Night Stalker and the stoic Vulcan Surik in Star Trek. On May 24, 1978, he died of a stroke at age 60 in Los Angeles, alone in his apartment. His estate, which included rare books, gold investments, and residuals from his TV work, was estimated at between $1 and $2 million. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors from Mission Impossible who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.